Benjamin was my running partner yesterday morning. We went out to Platte River State Park together. So we started when it was kind of rainy and the trails were muddy and we were having all this fun. And we got done and we kind of went through this big open area to where our car was and we were jogging. And all of a sudden, both of us pretty much saw the same thing at the same time. We've seen this before, and it's been a while since we've been able to stop at this place just because there's no compelling reason to stop. But yesterday there was thousands of perfect reasons to stop. The thing we saw was a mulberry tree. Now, have any of y'all ever eaten a fresh mulberry before? Like, you know that this is like God's gift to humanity. I mean, this is like, if you get these things at the right time, they're just perfect. And, you generally don't see them in the city because mulberries are very messy. The birds take the mulberries, they drop the mulberries on the cement, on cars, and everything gets stained. So you don't really see them in the city very much, but, out in the middle of nowhere, they're perfect. And I would conservatively guess that between the two of us, we ate about 200 to 300 mulberries. Like, our hands and our faces were just, like, stained with the mulberry juice, and like, we're thinking about going back out today. I mean, they're just that good. Now, just think about, like, this trail. Like, all the horses would go on this trail. The mountain bikers would go past this. The walkers and runners and hikers would go past this. And, sometimes I wonder, like, in life, like, think about this, in life, I wonder how many of us are just, like, hurrying so fast to get from, like, point A to point B that we just pass the mulberry trees of life. Yeah, I think that some of us, like, we pursue pleasure with such hurry that we actually just hurry right by it. I think there's probably a lot of mulberry trees in our lives that, we're just totally missing. The pleasure is there. The pleasure is what we seek, but we're in such a hurry that we totally miss it. Now, let me just ask you a question. Like, if I were to ask you how you're doing, I'm probably going to get one of two responses. You're probably either going to say the word good. Yeah, I'm doing good. And when's the last time you've talked to someone and they, oh, I'm doing terrible. I mean, this is like the worst day of my life. I mean, most of us hide it pretty good, so we say good. Or the other thing we might say is, I'm busy. You ever asked anybody that before? How you doing? Oh, I'm busy. I'm crazy busy. We got so much stuff going on. Now, I'm going to talk about busyness today. And when I talk about busyness, I'm not talking about like the nurse that's just done like, 2 shifts back to back at the ICU. I'm not talking about the person that's got to work 2 or 3 jobs just to make ends meet. I mean, that person, they're tired. They're exhausted because at least for this season, life is tough. Now, when I talk about busyness, what I'm talking about is the stuff that's usually pretty self-imposed. We take on another project at work. We sign up to do something in the community. We've encouraged our kids to, take a class or participate in an activity. Now, I think for some of us, like, busyness is almost becoming like an addiction. We just can't imagine our lives if we weren't busy, and we fear what would happen if our lives, if they're not busy. Now, most people I know are busy, and I think one of the things that we're really busy with is work. I think even if we just put in 40 hours, like even when we're not there, we're still kind of checked in. And a lot of us work a whole lot more than 40 hours. I actually called a friend up this week, early in the week. I hadn't seen him for a while, and I said, hey, you want to do something later in the week? And guess what he said? He said, well, this is a really busy week at work, and if there's something really specific that turns up later in the week, let me know. Like, if you know me, I speak pretty directly to people, and I clarified that, like, this was not like a premonition to a future invitation. If something really good pops up, I said, this is the invitation. Like, do you want to do something? He actually went back to work. I hadn't heard from him since then. Now, like, even like, what about like, for kids? Like, when I was a kid, like, I got kids. My kids are busy. I'm not speaking, to all of you. I'm speaking to me and many of us. Like, when I was a kid, like, we started to play baseball in 3rd grade. We started to play basketball in 5th grade. We started to play football in 7th grade. And we got by just fine. I don't know if you can believe that or not, but we did. We didn't take classes to prepare for the ACT or the SAT. Our schedules were very limited, and growing up, I'll say that there was beauty in the simplicity. There was real beauty in the simplicity. Like, my son's first grade baseball team is playing 21 games this year. My high school baseball team, I actually looked this up in the yearbook. We played 18 games. The first graders are playing more than the high school kids were playing. Now, what about this one? Like, McDonald's. You ever been to McDonald's before? Okay, is the reason that you go to McDonald's is because the food tastes so good? No, it's not, is it? Now, some of us may go there because it doesn't, you can eat pretty cheaply at McDonald's, but the reason that most of us go to McDonald's is why? Because it's fast. Now, back a few decades ago, it wasn't even fast enough just to go in the place where the food was already ready for you. They had to do this thing called the drive-through window. So now families can eat together on their way to soccer practice and dance practice, and this is God's plan of how families should eat together. It's crazy, like just how busy we have become, and I'll say this, that busyness is something that most of us have chosen, if only by our acceptance to this lifestyle. Now, busyness, I believe, for most of us is not necessary, nor is it inevitable. But I would say that many of us would say that it's good, because if we're not busy, then we're not important. Have you ever thought about that? If we're not busy, we're not important. Now, I'm going to tell you this. You're not going to increase your worth by becoming more busy. You're not going to be more important. You're not going to be more powerful. You're not going to be better because you're busier. You're just going to be busier. And you know exactly where that gets you. This week was a very busy week for me. I taught a class down at Grace University for 2.5 days, and I still had the whole pastor thing for the 40 or 45 or 50 hours. David had a few baseball games. There was not much time in my schedule this week. Now this week I had to tell many people with a very straight face, Craig, do you want to do something? No, I can't do it because I'm too busy. Now, God says that we should love Him and we should love others. Now, I've always understood the most important investment that I make as a person is in the people that I love the most. So like, think about this. Like, I'm going to die someday. It's going to happen. It is going to happen to me. I'm going to die. And when I'm on my deathbed, like, I doubt I'm going to be thinking, gosh, I just wish I would have spoken a few more words to a few more people, or written a few better words that people would have liked a little bit more, or led a few more people so, whatever that leadership causes will happen. I just don't think I'm going to wish that. What I think I'm going to wish is that there would have been a few more runs with Benjamin at the park, a few more mulberries that we would have eaten together. I think I'm probably going to wish, David, my little guy, he loves to laugh. I'm probably going to wish that, David and I just had some more of those laughter nights together where we just sit and laugh and make each other laugh. And I'm probably going to wish that, I had some more long conversations with Amber. Now, we got this really cool thing, like, she's a marriage and family therapist, so her job is to listen. A preacher, my job is to talk. So we got the greatest conversations, like, you can't beat it. When there's conflict, it's really funny. Like, she's like trying to dig all this information out, and I'm like, let's just pray about it and things will be cool. I'm going to tell you this, that life is too short to be busy. Life is too short to neglect the things that are the most important to us. And I'll say this, life is too short to neglect the people who are most important to us. Now, there's another thing that God tells us to love. He tells us to love people, but the first thing He tells us to do is love Him. Jesus was asked what the most important commandment was, and He said you should love the Lord your God with all your heart, your strength, your mind, and your soul. So what God does to help us love Him is He gives us something. It's kind of a churchy word. I'm going to give you a word, but it's kind of a churchy word. It's a word that most of us don't use most of the time. I think when we hear this word, we kind of think it's a rigid, dogmatic word. But this word is really, it's God's gift to us. And this is what we're going to look at the rest of the time this morning. What God gives us to connect to him is what's called Sabbath. Now, who here used the word Sabbath in your conversations this week? We didn't have anybody we had one person at the first service, and he was 2 years old. Nobody else used that word, and it's not a word that we use a lot, but I'll say that Sabbath is going to be as indispensable to our souls and our minds as water is going to be to our bodies. Sabbath is, like Carl Jung, he's a psychologist. He wrote that hurry or busyness is not the instrument of the devil. He says that hurry is the devil. Now, one of the things that busyness is going to do, the more we get caught up with the busyness of the world, the more we are going to lose connection with the creator of the world. Now, if you hear nothing else this morning, like if you've been checked out and you want to check out again, just listen for the next 20 or 30 seconds, because this is the main point I want you to get this morning. For most of us, the greatest danger of our faith is not renouncing our faith and turning the other way. For most of us, the biggest danger that we have regarding our faith is that we get so distracted, so busy, so rushed, and so preoccupied that we settle for a very mediocre version of the faith that God wants us to believe and live out. We will just skim the surface of this deep relation, of these deep waters that God wants us to dive into. Now, as I was looking at this sermon series back a couple months ago, I was really, the sermon series, the point is this point of these 5 weeks is to help us be able to help ourselves to grow in our relationship with God. You're responsible for your own growth. So the temptation for me was, okay, I'll just start with Bible study, and we'll teach them how to read the Bible, and then I'll go to prayer, and we'll learn how to pray together, and then we're going to go to community, and we're going to try to find some people in our lives that are going to help us grow. And then I realized that I can't do that. We got to do two things first. We did the first thing last week, and that is dealing with our past. Some of us have tried these things before, and we failed, and we just have to know that our future doesn't have to be the same as our past, and we talked about that last week. Where we have once failed, we can succeed in the future. Now today, before we learn about Bible study next week and just how it is that we can just read the scriptures in a way that's really meaningful, in a way that's really simple, that will invite God to speak to our lives and allow us to respond to what God is speaking. And then the next week after that, as we pray, prayer, it's so cool, it's so beautiful, it can be so simple but so profound that prayer at its absolute best is going to connect us to God, to connect us to others in ways that absolutely nothing else can. But before I talk about these things, we have to create spaces, we have to create places, we have to create times where we can do these things. And that's what a Sabbath is all about. Now, I'm going to make this about you for a little bit, okay? Most likely, you're a pretty busy person. As I just look around, you guys, most of you have kids, most of you have jobs, you have responsibilities outside of those two things. And as I look around, most of us are going to be pretty busy people. Maybe it's the job that you have, it's demanding. Maybe you're going through this season of life where work is just a little bit too much. Now, some of you have kids. You got 2 kids, you got 3 kids, you got 4 kids, you got more kids. To raise these kids, it takes a lot of time and it takes a lot of energy. I know that some of you have responsibilities outside your immediate family. Maybe you're caring for an adult parent who can no longer care for themselves, and that's a lot of work. Maybe for some of us, there's an illness that we're dealing with, and this illness is just taking a lot of energy from us. For the students, you're trying to balance school, you're trying to balance work, you're trying to balance, your friendships, and many of us who are older, we've been there, and that was a very challenging time for us. We know what you're going through, at least to some extent. What about this one? Is there any perfectionist in here? Any fellow perfectionist in here? You know that the demands of perfectionism can be taking a toll on you. You're so busy, and we're so busy trying to make things just right. Now, I got a little, I figured this out just like last week. An imperfect person cannot be perfect. That's just for all you perfectionists out there. It's a free little 5-second commercial. Now, busyness, it creates all types of problems, doesn't it? Now, just think about that. Think about a time that you've been really, really busy. It has created a lot of problems for you. You get tired, you get stressed out, you get restless. We don't get to do the things that we want to do. Let me ask you this, like when you're busy and stressed out and tired, do you make your best decisions at this time? No, you don't, do you? Now, the last thing that busyness will do is it will make it really, really tough to create time to connect with God. So one more question. Do you ever feel like there's days when your responsibilities are greater than your resources? You just wake up and you look at your to-do list, you look at your responsibilities. You might look at what is it that you owe, who is it that you've made a promise to. And then you look at your resources and you're like, wow, how in the world am I going to pull this off? Now, if this is you, at least some of the time, I want you to know that Jesus did not die on a cross so that we're overcommitted and under-resourced. Jesus came to the world and he showed us how to live and how to love. And he has come so that we may have abundance in life. Now, Ecclesiastes in chapter 2, verses 22 through 23, this is really interesting. I mean, this book is an old book. Ecclesiastes, you go back like probably 3,500, almost 4,000 years, when you're talking about Ecclesiastes. This is an old book. This is before like youth soccer. It's before dance. It's before we had bills and things like that. So even back then, listen to what he writes. Chapter 2, verses 22 through 23. So what do people get in this life for all their hard work and anxiety? Their days of labor are filled with pain and grief. Now listen to what he says next. Even at night, their minds cannot rest. Even at night, their minds cannot rest. Now I want you to think about last night. Like you fell asleep on the couch, you fell asleep in bed with your head on the pillow, wherever it was. Did you have a mind that could not rest? Or was it more like this? Oh, wow, today was a great day. I went running, I ate mulberries. I got to go for a walk with the dog, and it was really cool, and I just can't wait for tomorrow. It's perfect. And or was it something like, wow, today took a lot out of me. There's that tough conversation, and I got this to-do list that I didn't make much progress on, and I got a ton of stuff to do tomorrow, and oh gosh, I got to go back to work on Monday. Got to figure out what we're going to do with the kids, and was it over here, or is it over here? And Ecclesiastes is over here. Like there's this mind that cannot rest. Now, I'm just going to ask you a few questions here, and I want you to be honest with yourself. Do you ever wake up in the morning and feel tired? Okay, so whenever does you wake up? Do you ever wake up in the morning and feel tired? What about this one? Do you ever find yourself like with your friends and your family and your loved ones, yet you cannot be fully present with them because your mind will not it just won't shut off? And the last one, do you ever feel like you're just keeping up? You're not making a lot of progress, you're just kind of like treading water and not making a lot of good ground? Well, if your answer is yes to at least one of those questions, I have a next question for you, and is this. What is it that you're going to do about this? You don't want to just keep up for the rest of your life. You don't want to be in the presence of the people that you love for the rest of your life and be totally distracted by something that's not important. You don't want to go to bed at night restless and wondering, what tomorrow's going to be like. Now, the question is, what is it that you're going to do about it? Now, most of us can't quit our jobs. We say, boss, just wanted to let you know, my pastor said that work is stressing me out too much, and I quit. 2 weeks, 1 week, it doesn't matter, I'm done. Okay, you're going to have a whole new set of problems if that happens. Now, there can be balance in the workplace, we can set boundaries, and we're not going to trade in our kids. That's probably the second thing that just keeps us really busy. If I got rid of David, that would really free up a lot of time, and I still got Benjamin. He's kind of... No, we can't do that either. So there's some things that we can't and shouldn't change, but there is some things that we can and we should change. Now, in the Gospel of Luke, chapter 10, verses 38 through 42, Luke tells this story about Mary and Martha. Verse 38, as Jesus and the disciples continued on their way to Jerusalem, they came to a certain village where a woman named Martha welcomed him into her home. Her sister Mary sat at the Lord's feet, listening to what he taught. But Martha was distracted by the big dinner she was preparing. She came to Jesus and said, now, you can understand this. Like, Mary's sitting here just like hanging out with Jesus. Like, she's at Jesus' feet, they're just talking. Meanwhile, Martha, she's in here baking bread, she's cleaning the kitchen, she's getting the table set. Now, if you're Martha, you're going to complain about this probably, aren't you? And that's what Martha does. She says, Lord, doesn't it seem unfair to you that my sister just sits here while I do all the work? Tell her to come and help me. Now, at this point, I think, if you're not familiar with this story, a lot of us are probably pretty sympathetic with Martha, aren't we? You've been in a place before where you've been doing most of the work and someone else is getting most of the fun, and Jesus' answer is going to surprise you. Because what Jesus says is, but the Lord said to her in verse 41, my dear Martha, you are worried and upset over all the details. There's only one thing worth being concerned about. Mary has discovered it, and it will not be taken away from her. So one of the really interesting things about this text, I was just kind of reading through this whole area of the Bible the other day, and one of the really interesting things is what happens right before this text. Right before this text is probably the most famous and perhaps profound parable that Jesus ever spoke. It's the parable of the Good Samaritan. So basically they go up and ask Jesus, like, what's the most important commandment? Jesus says to love God, love other people. Oh yeah, by the way, other people, I got this story to tell you. It's about this guy that's the story of the Good Samaritan. You've heard that before. Now, what happens after this text, right after this text, are by far the most famous words that Jesus ever spoke. This is where Jesus teaches us how to pray. In the Gospel of Luke, in the next little pericope, Jesus says, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. You know the rest. So we know that Jesus is at the pinnacle of his teaching here. And this kind of seems like an odd story, but we know that Jesus is being profound. So what was going on was that Mary was exactly where Mary needed to be. Jesus was on his way to die. He didn't care if the table was clean. He didn't care if he was having ribs or bread or whatever. Jesus wanted to spend time with Mary and Martha. Meanwhile, Martha was in the kitchen baking bread. Now think about this. Martha was in the kitchen baking bread when the bread of life was 15 feet away from her, wanting to talk to her and wanting to listen to her. What Martha did is she completely missed the mulberry tree. She had an opportunity to do something that very few people would ever have to do, and she was too busy with her distractions. Now I'll say this, like Martha, many of us are choosing some good things or some pretty good things, and we're neglecting the best thing, a thriving, growing, flourishing relationship with God. I've been thinking about choices quite a bit lately. Most choices are not right and wrong. Most of the choices that you make in your life are not going to be between right and wrong. Some of them are going to be between bad and worse. I talked to a family the other day at the hospital, and they had to choose between bad and worse. They didn't have any good alternatives. They just had to choose which they thought was going to be better of the two. I was talking to a kid about where he's going to go to college a couple weeks ago. And he had two really good choices. His choice was between good and better. Now, as we choose how we spend our time, as we choose how we spend our energy, as we choose how we spend our resources, we're not choosing between right and wrong. We're generally choosing between good and better. Now, let me tell you a story. Some of you were around 4 or 5 years ago when I graduated. And I remember the night before I graduated, it was in a great big gymnasium. They had all the PhD students in the front row, and that's where our chairs were going to be. And me and Benjamin went and found where the chair was going to be, and it was just cool to see like all these chairs, and like there's going to be a big worship service, and it was going to be so cool. And I asked Benjamin, I said, so what do you think about all this? We were kind of looking at the chair, and I was like thinking he's going to say, I'm proud of you, Daddy. And like what he said totally made a big shift in my life. He's probably only 8 or 9 years old at the time, and it's tough to talk about this, but he looked at me, little guy at the time, and he just spoke the truth. I don't think he thought it was going to be nearly as profound as it was, but he was saying, I'm glad you're done because maybe we can start spending some more time together. So I got this title in front of my name. I learned quite a bit. There's this paper that's on the shelf in all these libraries, but what I did is I chose a lesser thing and missed out on a far greater thing. There's so many nights that all these papers and computers just envelop this dining room table that we have, and I stayed up late, and I probably woke up and I was grumpy, and I missed out probably on almost a year of my kid's life. The moment that he said that, I just knew that I had chose a lesser thing and sacrificed a much greater thing. Now, you've heard me say this before, and you're going to hear me say it again. Sometimes we have to say no to lesser things so that we can say yes to the best. Sometimes we have to say no to normal things. Sometimes we have to say no to pretty good things. Sometimes we have to say no to very good things so that we can say yes to the best things. Now, think about your life and your current situation. Some things we can and we should not change. We can't change our jobs probably. We can't change our family situation. And we shouldn't change those things. But the distractions, we can change. Now listen, Luke said that Martha was distracted. That's the word he uses. She was distracted by not just some things, but by many things. Now, I would say that television can be a distraction. I think that for many of us, television can be a big distraction. I think that telephones can be a huge distraction. I think that social media can be a distraction. I think that trying to climb the social ladder can be a distraction. There's this quest for the perfect yard or the perfect body or the perfect house or the perfect party. And what these things can do is they can distract us from a perfect God. We can connect to celebrities on Twitter. We can connect to our old high school friends on Facebook. We can connect to the world by reading the USA Today. But these very things can disconnect and distract us from a deep connection from the teller of the greatest story ever. St. Augustine wrote, "You have made us for yourself, O Lord, and our soul is restless until it finds rest in you." The psalmist says, "My soul finds rest in you, God alone. My salvation comes from you," our soul. Think about that, our soul. Our soul is given rest. It's the depths of who we are, and we'll find rest in God and God alone. There's no person, there's no experience, there's no vacation, there's no amount of money that will allow us to experience the rest that God promises us and God gives to us. We cannot be one with ourselves. We cannot be one with the world until we are one with God. Now, Jesus said in the text that Benjamin read a little bit ago, then Jesus said, "Come to me, all of you who are weary and carry heavy burdens." Okay, so if this is you, if you're weary, if you're tired, if you're worn out, Jesus says, "Come to me. Give me all this stuff and I will give you rest." For the worriers and the anxious people who are out there, go to Jesus and he will give you rest. If we carry bitterness and resentment, we go to Jesus and he will give us rest. For the overwhelmed and the under-resourced, we go to Jesus and he will give us rest. For those of us who are debtors, we will go to Jesus and he will give us rest. To those of us who are doubters, we will go to Jesus and he will give us rest. Rest is not going to be found in our busyness. Rest is not going to be found in just being a little bit more productive. Rest will not be found in our distractions. Rest will be found in our stillness, and in our stillness we will find grace. Now, God tells us in Psalm chapter 46, verse 10, and you've heard this verse before. He says, "Be still and know that I am God. So that's what God says to us, is be still and know that I am God. Now, it's very obvious what he doesn't say. He doesn't say, like, be busy and know that I'm God. Be more productive and know that I'm God. Be more worried. Be all jacked up inside and know that I'm God. He says, be still. Stop. Pause. Take a break. Chill out. And know that I am God. The last text we're going to look at is Exodus chapter 31, verse 13. So here God is speaking to Moses. Moses is getting ready to speak to the people. So this is God telling Moses what to say to the people. Now, listen to what God tells Moses. You are to speak to the people of Israel and say. Okay, so here's what God wants Moses to say to the people of Israel. Above all, okay, first and foremost, before everything else, you shall keep my Sabbath. For this is a sign between me and you throughout your generations, that you may know that I, the Lord, will sanctify you. Another word for sanctify is to make holy, to make one with God. Now, when I talk about Sabbath, I think all of a sudden, some of us are thinking, okay, this is kind of a rigid, dogmatic, legalistic thing. I don't know about you, like when I was a kid in the little town I grew up in, you couldn't go to the grocery store on Sunday and buy any groceries because it wasn't open. The only thing that was open in this little town was the churches. Now, I think like when we think of the Sabbath, we think, okay, I've got to just take Sunday completely off. Oh yeah, that's really going to work out. Our kids have games. I got to catch up on some stuff so I can get ready for the week. So if we think about the Sabbath as something that's really rigid and legalistic and dogmatic, all it does is add more anxiety and stress to our already overcrowded and busy lives. If we just put it on the to-do list with everything else that God tells us to do, it can become overbearing. So I want us to think about Sabbath. It is something like this. Sabbath is time apart. Okay, so this is what it can look like for you. Sabbath is time apart from the world and time set apart so that we can be one with the creator of the world. So Sabbath basically just says, okay, world, I'm just going to retreat, for like 15 minutes. The world's still going to be fine. And 15 minutes later, the clock is still going to be ticking. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to find the creator of the world. I'm going to talk. I'm going to listen. I'm just going to sit. I'm going to rest. Now, just think about this. Like, I want you to start small. If, like, Sabbath isn't something you're working on, I want you to do something that's manageable and sustainable and something that you can succeed at. So what I would say is, like, just for the next 7 days, like, take a Sabbath every day, like for 15 minutes. Maybe this week, like, you'll just say, okay, I'm going to take a chunk of a night, like, on Tuesday night from 7 to 10. I'm not going to work. I'm not going to, pay the bills. I'm not going to worry about the lawn. I'm just going to spend some time with my family, and, we're going to spend some time with God together, and just something really simple like that. And I can see some of you are thinking, Craig, I don't have time for that. And I'm going to say, you don't have time not to do something like that. Because the alternative is that you just continue being stressed and worried and worn out, tired, fatigued, all these sorts of things. Now, I want you to think about something like, instead of saying, I don't have time, and I don't get, this is, spiritually, relationally, whatever. Like, instead of saying, I don't have time, I want you to say, it's not a priority. Because you do have time. Because I know people who are busy. I know people that are committed, and they make this happen. So think about this. Like, I would say, okay, I don't have time to go to the doctor. No, I have time to go to the doctor. Seriously, I do. It's just not a priority. You say, I don't have time to practice baseball with my kid. Like, you got time to practice baseball with your kid. It's just not a priority. I don't have time to spend 15 minutes with God. You have time to spend 15 minutes with God. It's just not a priority. Now, here's what happens. Let's just say that you can pull this off this week. Let's just say, like, starting today, you're going to spend 15 minutes with God every day. Now, next week, we're going to look specifically how to make the most use of that time. I think a great way to do it this week would be, in your bulletin, you got the full sheet of paper, and it's got, like, those 10 questions and the prayer in the back and the little Bible study. Just what it would look like if you or your spouse or your boyfriend and girlfriend or you and your middle school or high school kids just went through this together. That can be your Sabbath. But here's what's going to happen. If you can pull this off, here's what God will do in our life. All of a sudden, you're going to find yourself as more rested. You're going to find yourself as more centered. You're going to find yourself as more focused. You're going to find yourself as more balanced. You're going to find yourself as more equipped. And it's going to work like this, and I've said this before, that when you do this, that God is going to be able to do more in you and through you in the next 23 hours and 45 minutes than if you just tried to grind out the next 24 hours all on your own power. Because the same exact thing is going to lead us to the same exact results. We're going to just get more tired, and we're going to be more busy and more fatigued and more burned out. And I'll say that take your fears and your failures, take your distractions and your dismay, take your wounds and your worries, take them to God. Jesus says, come to me. All of you who are weary and carry heavy burdens, come to me, and I will give you rest. I will give you rest for your souls. God says, be still. Be still and know that I'm God. It's in the stillness. It's not in the busyness that we're going to discover God. And God is going to invite us to experience his grace and his healing and his rest. So let us pray.